Have you, in life, ever known something was coming? Kids, you probably can answer this. You ever think about a day that you know is coming, but it's like it seems like so far away, and then all of a sudden it's here? What kind of day can you think of like that? Mondays? Amen to that. Abby. Yeah, when something fun's coming up, like going to have fun at Get Air. Yeah. Liam, can you think of one? Christmas. Yeah. It always seems like forever away, and then all of a sudden it's here. Connor, I can't hear you. Halloween, yeah. Holidays, right? They sneak up on us out of nowhere, right? So, our verses today talked about that a little bit, right? That the day is going to come like a thief in the night. It can happen at any moment. But it's been a long time, right? It's been 2,000 years since Jesus left this earth, right? But what if Jesus came back right now? Man, that would have been great timing, right? Didn't happen. But it could, right? Like, as we read, it says it's going to happen suddenly. So, what if he came back right now? Are you ready to meet him face to face? Would he say, "Well done, good and faithful servant," if today was that day? So, you see, the Thessalonians, right? We were talking about this last week. This week continues from last week. They were concerned about what happens to those who die, right, before Jesus comes back, and what happens when Jesus comes back. And they've asked Paul through Timothy, who brought them the first letter, and now he's writing back, right? So we have to kind of read between the lines of what their questions were by what Paul answers. So last week he talked about, hey, those who died, it's okay. They're gonna be with Jesus. You don't have to worry about that. And then this week he addressed in this next part, he's addressing this is what happens at the return of Jesus, right? Because they had questions about that too. Remember, Paul was chased out of Thessalonica before he could finish teaching. And so part of this reason for the letter is, hey, I didn't abandon you. Hey, I see you guys are doing great. And hey, let me answer some questions that you have or some teaching I didn't get to finish, right? So we're going to dive into this today, looking at the anticipated swift return of Jesus, right? Because remember, the first century people thought they were going to be alive when Jesus came back. We have the opposite problem sometimes. We've seen that 2,000 years have eclipsed since then, right? They've come and gone, and Jesus hasn't come back. And sometimes we can think, man, that is a long day off still. But the truth is, it could happen tomorrow or right now. Again, that would have been good timing, right? So our section, I'm gonna read through it. We're gonna go through it together today. It begins with Paul addressing the times and seasons. In other words, when will this happen, right? If you remember from Acts, this is one of the last things the disciples asked Jesus as well. When is this all going to take place? And kind of like Jesus, Paul doesn't answer that question, right? He says, now concerning the times and seasons, brothers, you have no need for anything to be written to you. For you yourselves are fully aware that the day of the Lord will come like a thief in the night. While people are saying there is peace and security, then sudden destruction will come upon them as labor pains come upon a pregnant woman, and they will not escape. In other words, you know that no one knows the day or time, right? That's not the main concern, right? You don't need me to write to you about that. I told you that. I explained that to you. And you know that this can happen at any moment, right? So they're anticipating. This is a good reminder for us. This could happen at any moment, like right now. And then it says that it'll come upon them swiftly as labor pains upon a pregnant woman. Now, a pregnant woman knows that the end is going to be birth if everything goes correctly, right? But labor pains come out of nowhere. Having two kids, I watched my wife out of nowhere one day just be like, it's the day. I mean, you know it's coming, but you don't know exactly when. And so he's kind of comparing it to Christians should know that day is coming. We're followers of Jesus. We know he's coming back. We should be ready at any time. You should have your bag packed and ready to go to the hospital because that baby's coming, right? So he's saying, you know that it's going to happen at an hour you don't know, but be ready, right? And those who are not ready are going to face judgment. See, another thing that the first century believers knew is that when Jesus comes back, it's a day of judgment as well. That's very apparent from the Old Testament about the day of the Lord, right? That, yes, when the Lord returns, it's great news for his people, and it's the final judgment. And so it's bad news for those who are not his people, right? So Paul mentions, again, that this is going to be sudden. It's going to happen. And then he compares it also to a thief in the night, right? If you know a thief's coming to your house tonight, what are you going to do? Are you going to go out? What, Sophia? What are you going to do? You're going to lock your doors. You're going to take some precautions because you know it's going to happen, right? That's why thieves don't come when we know they're coming, right? They happen when you're not paying attention. So he's saying be vigilant, right? Because it can happen just like that. Let's continue on in verse 4. But you are not in darkness, brothers, for that day to surprise you like a thief. For you are children of the light, children of the day. We are not of the night, nor are we of the darkness. So let us not sleep as others do, but let us keep awake and be sober. For those who sleep, sleep at night, and those who get drunk are drunk at night. So Paul reminds the Thessalonians, as well as us, that we belong to a different kingdom, right? We're not living in darkness, right? The Bible compares light and dark to living in God's kingdom and not living in God's kingdom, and good and evil, right? It uses those things, and Paul is continuing that right here. If you know Jesus, you don't live for yourself anymore. You live for Jesus's kingdom, right? So we should not be unaware. So in other words, there's no reason for this day to surprise us because we know with surety that it is coming, right? We know that it's coming. Like Pastor Steve said last week, you can take it to the bank that he will come back, right? But we don't know exactly when. Being ambassadors of the kingdom, we are in the world, but not of it, right? Or at least we shouldn't be. We shouldn't be absorbed with the same worries and the same pursuits of life that those who don't know Jesus are. And he says in verse 6, let us not sleep. So remember last week when he talked about sleeping, he was talking about death. This is not that. He's talking about being caught unaware. As if you were dozing in class and the teacher called on you. What? I don't know what to say, you know? So in other words, let us live with Jesus at the center, because if we don't, we're going to be caught unaware if we're not following Jesus, right? Let's go on to verse 8. But since we belong to the day, let us be sober, having put on the breastplate of faith and love, and a helmet, and a helmet, the hope, and for a helmet, the hope of salvation. For God has not destined us for wrath, but to obtain salvation through our Lord Jesus Christ, who died for us so that whether we are awake or asleep, we might live with him. So right at the end of that, he kind of flips back into the dead and alive thing, the awake and the asleep. See, Paul can be confusing sometimes because he mixes his metaphors together. So whether we are dead or alive, we know that when Jesus comes back, if we followed him, we can take his promise as sure, right? So we know that we are going to be okay, and it's going to be a good day for us. Because we have Jesus, we're a new creation. So let us wrap ourselves in our faith, right? Paul reaffirms our place as believers that we are not destined for wrath. In other words, let me reassure you, because you were worried about judgment, that this is not a day of judgment for those who are in Jesus, right? It's not a day for wrath for us. We are not destined for that. Our faith means that this day is a party. It's a celebration when Jesus comes back, right? And then verse 11 says, therefore encourage one another and build one another up, just as you are doing. So, therefore, we have to look what it's there for, which points backwards, right? So all the previous thoughts that Paul has just shared. Therefore, in light of what Paul has just said, in light of what will happen to those who died and what will happen to those who are still here at the return of Jesus, encourage one another, love one another, walk with one another, right? You know what I see when I see this? I see discipleship, right? Walk with each other on this journey together, building each other up, helping each other along, right? We know that Jesus often talked about loving one another as one important aspect of our faith, right? And guess what? The Thessalonians were already doing that. And I think we are doing that, but we should strive to do it better and better and better, right? So as we read through that and we understand it now, what can we draw from that? What can we conclude? I'm going to say the main idea, the main statement from Paul is we can be confident that we will be ready for the sudden return of Jesus. We can be confident that we will be ready for the sudden return of Jesus. And how do we do that? What does Paul say? Paul tells us we can be ready by loving God and loving others, right? That's essentially what he said. We have to have that saving faith, the faith that motivates us in Jesus, right? If you're a believer, you have that faith. That's who he's writing to. He's writing to people who love Jesus, who are following Jesus. So we know that, one, you have to have belief, right? And then he tells the Thessalonians and us to encourage one another, to build each other up, to disciple one another, to walk together, right? So that sounds a lot like love God and love others, right? Which Jesus said a lot, right? So those two things are what Paul's saying. If we do that, we can be confident if we love Jesus and we love other people and we love them well, that we're going to be just fine on the day that he comes back. So our first point this morning, while we do not know the day or time of his return, we know that it is coming, and we can have assurance in our hope. So again, like I said at the beginning, maybe unlike the Thessalonians, maybe like me, sometimes you get in the place where you think, I'm going to die long before Jesus comes back. It's been so long, right? We can easily fall into that for completely the opposite reasons. The Thessalonians knew that Jesus had died, and they were quickly anticipating this return. We know that he died, and we know that it's been 2,000 years, so we don't quickly anticipate his return often, right? That's the wrong view to hold in our hearts. If we live that way, we're going to live wrongly. What Paul talks about is that this return could happen at any moment, right? Any moment, like right now. Still not happening. Maybe. It'd be cool. I'd love that for my last sermon to be right now, and then that'd be it. If we have a distant view of Jesus' return, then we are likely to take the I have plenty of time approach to life. I have plenty of time to love my neighbor. I have plenty of time to get right with God. I have plenty of time to deal with my sin, right? And whether Jesus comes tomorrow, 5 minutes from now, or next week, there is an end to all of our lives. And then our time is up, and none of us know that day or time either, right? So better to live as if it's tomorrow or 5 minutes from now or right now than with that long view in mind. So Paul doesn't encourage looking at this long view. In fact, he leans into the short view, right? He encourages them to be sober, stay awake. That command is just as much for us, right? As I look at that and I think about it, when we think that Jesus could come back in a month, a year, a decade, a century, we're falling asleep. We're not being sober anymore. We're not being awake, right? So that command is for us. Stay awake. And don't forget that Jesus may come today. And you may be face to face with him. And as great as that'll be, you'll also have to answer for your life. As we talked about in Christianity Explored, someday we'll probably see the bulk of our life, and we're going to be shamed for all the times we failed God and all the times we were disobedient. And we don't have to be ashamed because Jesus paid for that, right? That's the great, wonderful thing about grace, is that we can't earn it. We can't do it. It's not question time, honey. Put your hand down. I love you, honey. That's my daughter. Right? Gosh. We can't earn it, right? And yet, we still will see it and answer for it and grieve it and move on, and then we'll celebrate. That's why Paul says, be sober, stay awake, live your life in a way that matters, right? This urgency should give us hope. It should give us the ability to hold on to things in our life loosely, right? So much of the unbelieving world is driven by accumulating things. The best career, the best money, the best friends, whatever it is, right? If Jesus comes back 10 minutes from now, does it matter what kind of car you have? Does it matter how big your house was? Does it matter how cool your clothes were? Does it matter what bills you have left to pay this month? No. Somebody just said amen back there. I'm with you. Now, I'm not saying that enjoying a car is bad. I'm not saying that you can't have a nice car or a nice house or those things, right? We are blessed by God as well. And yet, those are not the driving force of our life, right? And also the worries of life, while important, please pay your bills. Please don't not pay them because Jesus may come back in 5 minutes. Be responsible. We're called to be good, loving people, right? But don't let them consume you, right? And that's the idea of a Christian life, is that we're not consumed by things or by worries, right? We're consumed by God. That's our focus and our hope and our goal, right? Eye on the prize. Our prize is our relationship with God. In other words, live in the light of eternity. The significance of these things, all the things we worry about, agonize over, strive to get in life, they're going to seem so small when Jesus comes back. They won't matter. And 1,000 years from now, we won't remember it, right? 2 millennia from now, I mean, eternity's a long time, and this life is really short in comparison, right? All the worries of this life seem like nothing compared to the gain we have in our relationship with Jesus. The guarantee of the return of Jesus means we won't always live in this broken world. Amen? Yeah. There will be a day when justice comes. There will be a day when our hurts will end. There will be a day when our joints don't hurt anymore. Yeah. There will be a day when we'll see Jesus face to face and we'll live with him forever. Hope. Hope as we walk through this broken world. We get to be lights as candles walking in a dark room to this world and point other people to that hope. Brings us to our next point. There are many who will be caught unaware, right? Paul says that. There will be many that will be caught unaware. There is a mission field waiting to hear and respond. So Paul reminds us that many will be surprised by the return of Jesus. And for them who do not know Jesus, it's a day of judgment. It's a day of destruction. It's a day of wrath. And it'll be a day of fear. Remember, he said, like the pregnant woman who feels labor pains, they cannot escape. Once birth starts, it doesn't stop. Same thing with the return of the Lord. The window's closed. There's no more time, right? And the end result is inevitable at that point. The imminent return of Jesus should cause us to feel the urgency of our great commission to share the good news, right? When I read passages like this, it reminds me that outside the doors is a world of walking dead, a world of zombies who think they're alive and they're not. They don't know the life abundant that they could have. They don't know that they could be saved from the very thing that has them living in death, right? They can be snatched away from that death, from their sin, and into this awesome life that Jesus has for them, if only they would hear. The Great Commission should be a wonderful opportunity that burdens us for those who are not following Jesus. See, we can get so caught up in what happens to us as we look to the day of the Lord, right? We love to think about, oh, when's it going to happen? How's it going to happen? And like Pastor Steve said, those are great debates, but those are debates for another time. Those are debates for another place. The main focus is that Jesus is coming. And that's great news for us, and it's bad news for people who don't know him. And we have a mission to tell people about him because he wants all to be with him, right? See, many will not have hope at his return. It will not be the joyous reunion that we read about as Christians. This should press us to remember that we have been sent. We've been sent like lifeboats to a shipwreck to pull people out of the water. And then the last thing that this passage should teach us is our lives should reflect our living for eternity rather than merely our earthly passing. As committed followers of Jesus, the focus of our lives are different than the non-believers around us, right? Money, fame, career, sex, admiration, all these things will consume us if we lean into them, right? None of that can be the drive of our life. And none of those things will ever bring you hope, right? There was a famous interview with Trent Reznor, who was the lead singer of Nine Inch Nails. And in the 90s, he was huge, made millions of dollars. And they said, how great is it to have all that money? And he said, you know what? I've had everything I've ever wanted, and I'm more miserable than I've ever been. And that's always stuck with me. Nothing that we pursue in this life other than Jesus will satisfy, because we have that God-shaped hole in us, right? Paul had taught that to the Thessalonians, right? Even in his short time he was there, he emphasized that to them. And it seems from verse 11 that he was confident that they're living that out, right? Because he said, continue doing so. You're all worried about what happens when you come face to face with Jesus. And he said, just keep doing what you're doing. You're doing great, and keep at it and do better and do more, right? They were living it out. And we know that when Jesus was asked, what is the greatest commandment? What did he say? Love the Lord love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, and all your soul, and all your strength. And then he said the second commandment's like the first, love your neighbor as yourself, right? Those two things shape a life. If you do those things properly, they drive your life, right? Our love for God inspires us to do the things that he's laid out as holy and righteous. We strive for that. Love for our neighbor means that we will serve our neighbors and their needs, right? It also means that we'll encourage one another to continue down that path, that road together. That's called discipleship, right? We keep doing that with each other. These words are just as much for us as they are for the Thessalonians. Keep doing it. Keep going. Keep building each other up. Keeping our eye on the prize means keeping a kingdom focus. What do I mean when I say a kingdom focus? That can be like a churchy term, right? I mean that we need to value the things that Jesus values. We need to value the things that he taught. And his kingdom is different, right? It's often called the upside down kingdom, right? Because in order to gain your life, you must lose it. In order to be first, you have to be last, right? It's backwards. It's backwards from how we think as humanity, because we're fallen creatures. In God's kingdom, loving God and loving others is the biggest priority. That should shape your life. That's how we live in light of eternity. Now, none of us do this perfectly. Let me reemphasize that. Nobody does this perfectly. this side of glory, right? But we know that God will complete us on the other side of glory. We know that we will be complete. He's promised to finish that work in us. And in the meantime, we strive for that end goal, right? Not because we want to earn it, right? You can't earn God's love and affection. You can't earn holiness or righteousness. We will never be those things on our own. And yet, because we love God, we want to do those things, right? This is where that belief, that love for Jesus that makes us do things, right? The belief that motivates, that we've talked about so many times. As a church, we've put this at the center of our mission. Remember, we spent all of last summer talking about this, and we even did a sermon series on our mission, how we've made this the core of us. Reaching up means loving God with all of ourselves, right? It's about striving to deepen our relationship with Him. As a church, we've said corporately, we're going to do this by worshiping together regularly, weekly, like we're doing right now, right? We've also said that we're going to do that by pursuing God daily, as individuals, as a church. That's a weird thing to say. As individuals together, right? As a church, we've said that reaching in is all about loving our church family around us and growing in our relationships together. As a church, we've said we're going to do this by building community in small groups and engaging in the life of the church. In other words, we want to get to know each other. We want to learn together. It doesn't have to be a Bible study as a small group. We've talked about that just doing life together is important. So our craft group is a small group. Our worship team, our musicians that come together, that's a small group that gets together to do something unique and share our gifts together. And that's part of this building community together. That's how we get to know each other in these small group settings. And then engaging in the life of the church, that's where God has gifted you with specific passions and talents and gifts to serve your church family, to support your church family, right? Yes, that means with money too. I see some of you looking at me. Yes, I'll say it. It means money too, right? Because we're committed, not to keeping this institution going, but because this is where Jesus has placed us and we love this church family. That's part of being committed to our church and growing together in relationship. We get to live together and serve one another. And of course, our last focus is reaching out, because our neighbors aren't just those who follow Jesus, right? We know that that's not the only thing that matters is who's inside the walls of the church. In fact, our biggest priority is about those outside the walls of the church. We've been sent as ambassadors. Ambassadors don't hang out in their home country, right? Sometimes they come to the embassy. We're at the embassy right now, but we're going to go out and be diplomats now. So we've committed to this as a church. We've committed to guiding others on their faith journey. That's why we're sharing stories like Patty's shared, like I've shared before, like Gretchen shared before, like Sherry has shared before, and the other Sherry has shared before, right? We've talked about the ways that we engage those who don't know Jesus and get to share that great news with them, right? And we want to journey with them. We know it's not a one-time decision. We know that it's a life change. We know that it takes time sometimes. Sometimes we get a 30-second elevator pitch, and let's be ready to do that. But most of the time, it's over the course of a life that we get to witness with our walk with Jesus to other people. So your circles, the people you run with that aren't sitting next to you right now in your day-to-day life, that's your mission field. All of us are missionaries. We've all been sent out. Some of us get to go overseas. Some of us go down the block, right? So we've committed to being that as a church. And we've also committed to loving our neighbors in practical ways. And that's where I was just talking about. The course of our life is a witness as well. So when your neighbor's house burns down, we have an opportunity to help them, right? In a practical way. We can bring them a meal. As a church, we could provide them clothing. In the meantime, we could raise funds for a new house. Those are all practical ways that show love. And hopefully, they'll say, why are you doing this? And we can say, because Jesus loves me. And because I love Jesus, I also love you. and he loves you, right? We believe that loving others means pointing people to Jesus. We point them to Jesus because he's the one who can perfectly love. We don't perfectly love, right? We're humans. And I know that I don't perfectly love, and I'm going to assume that you don't also. So we also believe that we are called to be the hands and feet of Jesus. This is the mechanism he has picked for his church to be in action. Like we talked about before, Jesus could have said that when you put your faith, hope, and trust in him, whoop, you're gone, and you leave this earth, right? That'd be a witness too. People just disappearing off the face of the earth. And yet, that's not how it works. He said, instead, I want you to go bring the gospel. I want you to participate in this mission with me. And he's given us authority in that, and he's given us responsibility in that. So we as a church have said we're going to lean into that. That's important to us, right? And if we do these things, if we shape our lives by reaching up, reaching in, and reaching out, then we have no need to worry at the coming of the Lord, right? If our life is striving after doing those things, he's going to say, well done, good and faithful servant, right? There are many voices calling to you, many things calling you to pursue different goals in life. Make sure the voice that is crystal clear in your ear is that of Jesus, that you're chasing after the voice of Jesus, who's calling you to join him in his kingdom way of living. Paul told the Thessalonians to continue doing what they'd already been doing. So for those of you who have your faith, hope, and trust in Jesus this morning, he's telling you, continue doing what you've been doing and strive for more. Strive to do it better. And if you have not put your faith, hope, and trust in Jesus, there's no better time because he could come back right now. Well, it's worth a try. When we keep our focus on God, when we keep our eye on the prize, we can be confident that we will be ready for the sudden return of Jesus.